So finally, I want to talk about how power is used to maintain social inequality. Of course, this is a really big question, and an anthropologist doesn't have all the answers. But in general, we can look at social inequality as sort of a pyramid, right? And the more that there is a division of resources, for instance, some people have more than others, or some people own land and some people toil on land or work on land and do not own it, the more we start to see this stratification of society. And generally, stratification, ends up looking like a pyramid in which the fewer people at the top of the pyramid have power and control a lot of what goes on in that society. Whereas the people who are controlled by those with power are generally the majority, right? And the people with power, this may be hereditary, it may be elected, it can be people with prestige who control others, it can be formal, such as people from a certain class always being elected to government positions. And that's true for tribes or not tribes, because tribes are not elected, but always being in the big man position, for instance, with tribes, or in a chiefdom, or in a state. It can be, that they have more financial resources than others. In some places, it can be that they have power to control others with weapons or with external sanctions. So, however this plays out, when we see social inequality, it often takes the form of this pyramid, right, where very few people have the most power, and the vast majority of people are controlled by those with power. One kind of stratification that we don't have formally in the United States is caste. But caste is a type of division within society that we do see across the world. It's best known, of course, for India, but there are also other places in which caste systems remain, and where they have been the traditional form of sort of social stratification or inequality. Places like Nigeria among the Igbo people, or the Songbun system in North Korea. So class is generally what we would attribute to our society, a state system that has a democratic government. So class is determined by things like wealth and or status, right? Generally, we're born into our class, although there is some chance of social mobility, that is either moving up in class or down in class. This is sort of the idea of the American dream, right? That someone can work very hard and move up in class. In theory, this is, ideal, right? That by working hard, everyone has the same opportunity to move up the social ladder. But in practice, there are systems that tend to keep people in the class that they were born into. So, for instance, like systemic racism, structural discrimination, even things like whether you fit in or not, right? Because we have all of these informal sanctions like gossip and people trying to hold on to their power and trying to keep outsiders out and insiders in. It is in fact very hard to move up successfully in social class, right? Even though ideally we can. Class often influences occupation. For instance, people who are in a family with, many generations of college graduates, for instance, generally will expect that their children also go to college. So that would influence their occupation in terms of what type of occupation they may take after getting out of college, which then influences how much money they may make, and kind of cements their position within that class. It might also influence marriage, right? Generally, in the United States, for instance, we meet people that we share things with, right? Interests, school, religious functions, but generally we are meeting people who are on our same socioeconomic level, meeting in a social way or an occupational way. So we tend to marry again within our class. And generally this is, marriage is influenced by class, but it's certainly not determined by it. So people can marry who they want in a class society. Caste, on the other hand, such as it is practiced in India, is something you are born into. You cannot change your caste because it is seen as part of your heritage, part of your blood, part of who you are. So in India, there are 5 sort of really general castes, with the Brahmin being at the top of this hierarchy. If you are born into a Brahmin family, often you will be in a high socioeconomic position and you will have a lot of opportunities. It's like being assured that you won't have any barriers, or you won't have many barriers in the things that you want to pursue. At the very bottom of the caste system are people who are actually outside. They're so low that they're considered outside the caste system, called Dalits, or untouchables, or who Gandhi called the Harijans, or children of God. Gandhi, when he became the leader of India, created a law that abolished making decisions based on caste, and found the idea of having untouchables and untouchable caste as absolutely abhorrent. But culture changes very slowly, and so there is still discrimination based on caste. So caste is determined by birth, cannot be changed. Although in some places caste is, of course, since it has been outlawed for over 50 years now, more like 70 years, there are places and families and regions where caste is less of an issue than it was before. Traditionally, caste was very much more important. So it doesn't allow any social mobility, right? Especially traditionally. Caste was linked to occupation as well. And there are many, many subcastes, like thousands of subcastes, in which your subcaste determined your occupation. So, if you came from a line of blacksmiths, then you would be a blacksmith. And sometimes your last name would, give some sense of that that connection, right? So all the people with a certain last name tend to, work in this area. And then also caste is, it's much more of a determinant of things like marriage and other, social things, and also occupation. So whereas, caste has, traditionally had more of an influence in terms of occupation, now less. It is still an important issue in marriage, right? And you saw this a little bit in the last module. We were talking about arranged marriage and how people generally want to marry within their own caste. Having said that, there are places in India that have, dropped the the strong focus on caste, and when looking for a match may say something like caste no bar, right? Just meaning that there are no barriers and that they would be willing to marry or have their children marry someone of any caste. But in general, when Indian people look for a marriage partner, they're looking for someone who is in their same subcaste, who they might call community, because they don't want to be using these outdated terms either. Um, but community means more than caste, right? It also means the other things like your heritage, where you're from, what language do you speak? Are you Hindu? What's your religion? Do you eat vegetarian or non-vegetarian? So there's a whole bunch of other things that are connected to this idea of community that also may include caste. Certainly, caste is less important in people's daily lives today than it used to be, say, 100 years ago. But it is certainly a different system than a class system.